December 20th, 1867. It was decided that Kondo-san and Okita were to be moved to Osaka, where Matsumoto-sensei was. Kondo-san had required serious surgery and treatment, while Okita needed to treat his tuberculosis. Only a few people had caught on to Okita's condition initially, but when it came time for him to leave, it was as if a dark cloud hovered over all of us. The departure of these two leaders brought solemnity and sadness to us all. Tensions were escalating in the Fushimi magistrate. The war could break out at any second. Since the chief had been shot, everyone seemed on edge at every corner. I guess, though, it can't be helped. Despite an intense investigation, no one could pin down a suspect. This only served to frustrate the soldiers further. Since coming to the magistrate, however, it seemed like the only way I could contribute was to make rice balls, or yuzuke, for the men to eat. Yuzuke? What is yuzuke? But since everyone was constantly occupied or on the move, gathering a group to eat was hard. I found myself with nothing to do after cleaning up the kitchen after dinner.
Yukimura-kun!
Oh, Yamazaki-san. A sharp voice came from behind me, and there stood Yamazaki-san in his ninja suit. Oh, you must have been out. Wow, you worked pretty late then, huh? I had assumed he was performing his scout duties, looking for any sign of a culprit responsible for the attempt on Kondo-san's life. I bowed to him calmly.
俺のことはどうだっていい。問題なのは雪村君のことだ。なぜまだ今日に残っている？ここはもうすぐ戦場になるぞ。
Yamazaki-san inhaled deeply, and he continued with a reserved expression.
君は近藤局長や沖田さんについて大阪に行ったとばかり思っていた。
Ah, that explains his surprise. All right.
俺があえて意見せずとも、土方副長は必ず君を戦場から遠ざけると思っていたんだ。
There was a hint of stress in his tone, and his exhaustion was coming through.
今の副長には雪村君を気にする余裕がないのかもしれないな。
Anyway, perhaps that is the case. Since Kondo-san was shot, Hijikata-san has been all over the place. I nodded and he immediately resumed speaking in a serious tone.
今からでも遅くない。君は近藤局長たちの後を追い、大阪に向かうべきだと思う。同行に許可が必要なら、俺が土方副長に掛け合ってくる。
There is no need. I'll be fine.
何が大丈夫なものか。
He raised his voice, his frustration gaining.
君の事情は知っている。高堂さんも見つかっていないし、今日に残りたいのは理解できる。君が鬼と呼ばれる者たちに狙われていることも。新選組がその君を守ると決めたことも分かっている。
Yamazaki-san, I had never seen him in this infuriated state, let alone show this much emotion.
だが、今日は次期戦場になる。とどまるのはあまりに危険だ。
Just from the way he'd been flailing his limbs and gesticulating, I could sense he was upset. So it's true. We're going to war. I'd known it was coming, but now war was finally at our doorstep. I muttered this to myself, and Yamazaki-san grabbed a hold of my shoulders as he responded.
まず間違いないだろう。体内にも楽観視している者はいるかもしれないが、例えば薩摩藩陣営は この伏見奉行所に対しても大砲を設置し始めている。
What?
薩長軍は士気も高い。数に頼っている幕府軍では苦戦を強いられるだろう。
The possible outcome Yamazaki-san was describing were both pointing to one thing: devastation. I was sure that Yamazaki-san still held some hope that the shogunate was superior to the Satsuma or the Choshu. However, because he'd witnessed their preparations firsthand as a scout, his perspective was better than anyone's.
加えて薩摩藩は最新の銃砲を備えている。局地的な戦いの結果は俺にもわからない。
Although I'm sure Yamazaki-san made an effort to comfort me, he was very obviously shaken.
しかし勝つのは我々だろう。動員数では幕府側が圧倒的だ。それでも万一ということがある。だから君は大阪行きの準備を。
待って! Yamazaki-san was rushing through his attempt to convince me, but I interrupted him. I'm not the only one in danger here. Any one of us could be at any time. Besides, you of all people should be careful considering you keep going into the enemy lines. That's almost asking for danger to happen.
俺のことはいい。だが、君が戦いに巻き込まれる必要はないだろう。
Yamazaki-san smiled wryly before sighing deeply.
俺には新選組のために危険を探るという役目がある。いざという時は死ぬことで味方に脅威を知らすのも任務の一つだ。
What?
そんな顔しないでくれ。俺は観察方に就いたあの日から命の使い道を決めてきたんだ。
There was so much to say, but I couldn't collect my thoughts quick enough. Then, I became desperate to tell him something, but the words froth, they struggled to come out of my mouth before. Then, why don't you go to Osaka, Yamazaki?
落ち着いてくれ、雪村君。どうして俺が大阪に？
You're the Shinsengumi's doctor, so you know everyone's condition better than anyone. His eyes grew wide in surprise as I continued. The men going to Osaka need your help too, Yamazaki-san! I want you to be beside Kondo-san and Okita more than anything too! I wanted him to know that he was worth more to us than just being a lookout in the city. I knew my voice was teetering on the edge of being irrational, but I had to tell him because I didn't want him to stay in a dangerous place. Immediately, Yamazaki-san began to calm down, and he responded in a peaceful tone.
大阪には松本先生が待っている。彼らを見るなら俺以上に適任だ。それでも局長や沖田さんが心配なら、なおさら君が向かうべきだと思うが。俺を手伝ってくれた君なら十分な看護を行えるはずだ。それに戦える人間と戦えない人間、どちらが残るべきかは明白だろう。
His words tore through me. I dug my fingernails into my hands as I gripped a tight fist, and I stared back into his eyes. I am aware of what dangers await me. But even then, I still want to stay here. Because... I'm scared to leave you. Being separated from the Shinsengumi is a lot scarier than being dragged into a war. All I think about is if everyone was okay, if they were safe, or worse. If war breaks out, then I'm sure you guys will be in need of any help you can get. Although I may not look like much, I too can treat the wounded. Yamazaki fell silent, and I continued. Besides, if you're going off to fight, Yamazaki-san, then even more reason for me to stay. I made a vow with you in the past that I'd watch over everyone when you're away. Yamazaki-san dropped his shoulders as he sighed, responding like he'd given up fighting.
雪村君の気持ちはよくわかる。俺も仲間が傷つくのは嫌いだ。だから危険な仕事は自ら進んで担うようにしているんだが。
Yamazaki-san. His smirk gleamed in my eyes, and my heart squeezed.
また同じことを頼んでしまうが、俺が留守の間はみんなを頼む。
はい。I smiled in response, and he shared with me a small grin as well. Suddenly, Yamazaki-san closed distance between us, holding me closer. He unraveled the cloth around his mouth, and his eyes wrapped me in with warmth by looking at me.
君は強い。
Eh? Yamazaki took my hand and muttered quietly.
こうまで新選組や大使のことを思ってくれる人は決して多くない。互いを本心から案じるのは、多くの死地を共に乗り越えながら背中を預け合ったものだけだろう。だというのに、今の君には彼らと同じ思いを感じる。
Those feelings. Oh my. Yamazaki-san made perfect sense. I could only wonder, though, if I deserved to be worried about. I mean, is it okay for you to give me the honor of what you suggest?
そんなに謙遜しないでくれ。少なくとも俺は同じだと思った。
Yamazaki-san's words filled my chest with warmth, like fresh tea being poured gently into the cup.
今の雪村君になら安心して傷ついた仲間を任せられる。だが君も俺にとっては大切な仲間なんだ。くれぐれも無理はしないでくれ。いつも自分の身を案じるように。
How could he say that to me? He's the one who's in danger the most. The thought didn't settle easily in my mind. But still, the fact he trusted me so heavily gave me an intense feeling of pride. Wakata. I nodded. Yamazaki-san nodded back in response, and he slowly loosened his grip on my hand.
俺はこれから土方副長に市中偵察の報告をしてくる。雪村君の話題になっても、その処遇について余計な発言はしないようにしようと思う。
Thank you so much, Yamazaki-san.
俺の方こそ感謝している。君のおかげで気が楽になった。君は俺に安心をくれたんだ。だからありがとう。
He smiled timidly to me as he expressed his gratitude. If I had given Yamazaki-san peace, then what he'd given me was meaning. He inspired me to believe that there was something I could do for the Shinsengumi, that I could be helpful to them, and it made me realize there's no way I can let him down. Upon discovering that he accepted me for who I was, it made me confident, an unfamiliar feeling. No matter how uncertain the future could be for me, I was no longer scared to see what's next. We welcomed the new year without the presence of Kondo-san and Okita by our side. An eerie blood-red sun set over the Kyo horizon. It was dusk on January 3rd, 1868. The only thing strong enough to cut through the icy chill of winter was the distant pang of gunfire in the direction of Toba. I wasn't sure if it was the shogunate army or the Sacho that shot first, but this first gunshot was the final straw. Before we'd known it, the shogunate army and the Sacho were at war. At long last, Kyo had become a battlefield, just as Yamazaki-san had predicted. Of course, the Fushimi Magistrate, base of the Shinsengumi, was not safe from the threat of battle. Around 800 riflemen had gathered from the Sacho camps to surround the magistrate. They were armed with advanced weaponry, which made the task all the more difficult for the Shinsengumi to deal with.